Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor, and you are joining in for my weekly photo editing live tips. Lots of regulars usually join in, and what I do is I collect images from readers and subscribers and viewers like you so that I can demonstrate editing your images. So as you can see by this little screen over here, I would love to get some of your images to be able to demonstrate what I would do in terms of photo editing on your images. So if you would like to submit some images, we have a new short link to be able to get to it real quickly. And you just have to go to our website, digitalphotomentor.com. I'm just writing in the shortcut here, digitalphotomentor.com/live. And that will take you to the form where you can submit your images and they will come up potentially on one of these events. So that's the link. You just go there, fill out the form to send us your images. Kinds of images I'm looking for are ideally raw files so that we can work with them and have more data. And anything that you either struggle to edit with, or if you have a specific editing question or challenge, I'd love to see what I can do. But what I normally do is just go through and have a look at what everybody submitted and demonstrate my process of how I approach the image and what I would do to it. So we've already got Anne, one of our regulars, rainy Vancouver. I've actually got a picture, your evening picture that you took from Vancouver. It's actually sunny here today in Edmonton, sunny Alberta. So welcome, Anne. She's one of our regulars and one of our past tour members. So it's always good to have her. Nancy is in Toronto and it's cold. We came out of the deep freeze last week here in Edmonton, Nancy. So we actually ended up with freezing rain the other night. And now we just got icy sidewalks and slush. So can't win no matter what, right? It's winter in Alberta. It's winter in Canada. What are you going to do? So I have a few images that I want to get started with. I'd love to hear, if you are new here, how you heard about this live and where you're joining us from. So please put that in the comments or in the chat if you're joining us live. And I'm going to get started right away here with a few images. I also wanted to mention that we have a webinar coming up. Rob, if you could please put a link into that on Monday. I'll mention more about that later. It's going to be 10 ways to get better image quality, and it's for beginners or intermediates who just want a little bit of a review and see if maybe there's anything that you can tweak in your workflow to get better quality images. So if you could share that in the chat, please, Rob, I'll bring that up. Lynette from Soldiers Point, Australia. Awesome. I'm guessing it's warm there as well. And Rita's in Manitoba. I've got one of your images as well, Rita. Elsie from the UK, welcome. Is it your first time joining us, Elsie? I'd love to know how you found out about this live, and I'd love for you to submit some photos as well. Rob, if you could put the link for the webinar in the chat again, and if you just joined, the link for the live submission for your photos so that I will edit them here is right there. So I'm going to hop over to Lightroom. Let me just get started with that and I will be right back. Okay, let me switch over so you can see my Lightroom a little bit better. There we go. All right. Apparently my sister-in-law is watching, Marilyn. So hi, Marilyn, if you're watching. You can see me. Oh, hey, Lynn's here as well. Nice to have you join us, Lynn. Another one of our tour members and cohort and fellow traveler with Anne. Deb from Alaska. I've got one of your images also. So here is the link to the webinar that we are doing coming up. And I'm just going to actually grab that myself. Awesome. All right. So early bird today on the webinar, if you still buy it today, is $9. And then tomorrow it's going to be going up to $19. Rob, if you could please, just for my benefit, please put that same link into our private chat. That would be great. Okay, so I've got a few images here. I did start on a couple of them, and I want to show you what I've done. Let's see. So Rita's here, Nancy. I'm hoping that Jean-Philippe will join, so I've got one of his images as well. But I'll start with this one of Anne's because I kind of already did a little bit to it. And it's pixelating a little bit here in the sky. Hopefully that's going to load and look a little bit better than it does now. There we go. Okay, so the original image, oops, let me get over here. There we go. The original image was really dark and almost black. And I want to take a look and see what time of day she took this. Oh, you just took it like the other day? Is this a new? When did you take this one? Oh, yesterday. Okay, cool. So it looks like she took it at 5:30 p.m. Tell me what time the sunset is there in Vancouver right now, Anne, because I feel like you just missed blue hour. I was able to pull out some of the blue in the sky, as you can see, but I'm guessing that blue hour is a little bit early. So one of the tips that I will give is make sure that you're photographing at the right time. So I'm just looking up sunset time in Vancouver right now is 4:42. So if this one was taken, indeed, if you had your camera time set correctly, this one was taken at 5:24. Which is about a half an hour after sunset, 45 minutes after sunset. So you want to kind of be right after that sunset. You might have missed the blue hour just a little bit. Okay. So the key with that is by hitting blue hour, you get more blue in the sky as opposed to black like this. Okay. So what I did to adjust this one, and I'm just going to close this bottom part here. Okay, so I'm just going to reset this and do over again what I just did to get to that point. Okay, so when you're looking at your histogram, when you're shooting these images, okay, my guess is you didn't give it more exposure because you already had some stuff clipping, which is this statuette thing or whatever the heck. Yeah, it looks like some sort of little art piece there on the dock was already overexposed and clipping. Okay, you can see the clipping with the red. Let me grab my cursor pointer here. You can see what I'm pointing at. Okay, so right here, you can see the red highlights on this statue thing. And anything that's, when I hit J on the keyboard, it shows the clippings. You can also turn them on and off here on the histogram. Okay. So it's showing me that this parts here in white are clipping or no detail. And then the parts in the deep sort of dark black areas have no detail as well. Okay. So the histogram represents that. Over on the left, you can see lots of black. And then over on the right, you can see that it's spiking a little bit on the right, which means that there is something clipping. So if you saw that, Anne, if you saw that and you didn't want to do more exposure because of the clipping, I totally get why you would stop your exposure there. But this image is actually a tiny bit underexposed. Okay. She said sunset was at 4:41. Then there was no blue hour. It was gray, which is difficult for Vancouver. But you'll still get the sky bluer at blue hour than you will after the fact. So my guess here is that it's simply just a little bit underexposed. Okay. So first thing I did was I changed it to landscape camera profile. And then I bumped up the exposure. So watch what happens when I bring up the exposure, because that's the exposure you want, more or less, on the city. And you can definitely see that it's cloudy, but you want more or less about that exposure on the city, right? And yes, this thing is overexposing, okay, but you can easily pull that back with some highlight adjustments, okay? So don't worry about things like light sources like that when you're doing your exposure. So you can see here, it's +2 is what I've pushed it up to. So this image is about 2 stops underexposed, okay? So what that means is Let's see, it looks like you were shooting in manual. Okay, so if you're shooting in manual and it was on the 0 mark, you need more exposure. So you could have opened up your aperture a little bit, or you could have done a longer exposure. Okay, so typically 5.6 at about 6 seconds would have given you a better exposure. Okay. All right. So first thing I did is increase the exposure. Then I'm going to do my normal check of the highlights. Obviously, there's lots of whites clipping, so I'm not going to increase it here. I'm going to decrease the highlights. And I'm not going to go too far because you'll notice if I go too far, now the city looks blah as well. So I'm just going to go a little bit to get some of the highlights in the city pulled down. But I'm going to bring this guy back with a radial filter and apply it just there, okay? So be careful of global adjustments, pulling the highlights down and going too far on the overall, okay? Then I'm going to bring some black. Now I'm holding in the Alt Option key to get these clippings showing up, okay? So let's do that a little bit more. I'm doing a little bit of clarity and maybe even a little bit of dehaze, okay? Let's see what dehaze does. It tends to darken that sky a little bit, so I like what's happening there, okay? The next thing I did was I adjusted the white balance because I find it fairly orange, and you will get a lot of orange in the city lights, but I think that the sky looks a little purple, so I'm just going to try auto and see what it comes up with, okay? So you'll notice it did change these numbers a little bit, and I think that's actually pretty good. I might even go a tiny bit farther and take a little bit of the magenta out like so, okay? So before, after, so far, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is go in and do the local adjustments. And I can also go to the HSL panel, which is also one of my favorite things to do, okay? So I'm going to take the saturation of these yellows down a little bit more, and I'm just going to use the targeted tool. So I click on this little guy here, this little circle, and I get this little crosshairs and an up and down arrow. Right? And I'm working in Lightroom, obviously. If you're working in Luminar, it has a similar tool. It doesn't have the color picker like this, but you'll find this in the color panel, the sliders, right? So notice just by bringing the saturation down, it took away lots of yellow and orange. Okay, so when I click and drag here, it's applying to those orange and yellow sliders, right? See how I can totally take the yellow out of the city? So I don't want to go all the way. I still want to have those nice complementary colors. Okay, so complementary colors are ones that are opposite on the color wheel, right? And then I'm going to see about brightening the sky a little bit more. So I'm going to use the luminance and the sliders here. Okay, so you can see that that's working on the blues, right? And that's doing a nice job. And I can try and do the color here as well because I still find it's purple. So let's see what happens. Yeah, now it's really purple. Let's see what happens if I go the other way. That's a lot more cyan. So I just want a little bit of a color shift there. So let's see what this hue saturation. See how purple it is? And it's more blue now, right? That looks better to me. Now, if I wanted to go farther and just correct the sky, I've got these new masking tools. So if you're using an older version of Lightroom, you'll see the radial gradient and the brush and the linear gradient as separate tools, and you won't see this masking tool. Okay, the advantage of these new ones, if you're using the current version, is it has some automatic or some AI tools, such as Select Sky. So see what it just did. Now I can go in and brighten the sky even more if I want to, okay? So I don't want to go too far with it. Maybe I'll bring the shadows up a little bit. How does that look? That looks good. Okay, then I can also try, let's see what happens for subject. So the program will try and figure out what the subject is based on pretty much what's in focus, okay? So that's actually a pretty good choice. And I'm going to use that to punch the clarity up, texture, and then maybe brighten it just a tiny bit more so those buildings really pop out. You see that? And I can check to see if anything is clipping, a little bit of highlights, bring those down a little bit. Okay, so now all we're doing for this image mostly is tone control. Okay. The next thing I want to go and add one more for that bright sculpture thing. And I'm going to use the radial gradient and just draw a circle around it. Okay. So I'm just putting a circle here and then bringing the highlights down. So I've got the J key that I can use to show clipping warnings, right? I'm just going on there minus until it goes away. See that? So now it's actually got some color in that little statue. Okay, so before, after. Now I saw a couple of questions in here. Let's see. Okay, so Anne wanted to know what ISO at night. So she's used ISO 200, which is actually a great choice for nighttime. Okay, so there's your full set of exposures. I'm assuming you use a tripod here because it's nice and sharp, and a 3-second exposure wouldn't be unless you had a tripod. So your choice here, ISO 200, perfect, good choice. Okay. And that's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about on the webinar on Monday is avoiding noise. And when you shoot at higher ISOs, especially at night with a longer exposure, you will get more noise. Okay. But the other thing is that when you shoot underexposed, can I use this example on Monday, Anne? I won't tell them it's your image, but can I demonstrate this for under exposure? Because what's happened here is she had a nice low ISO image, but let me see what happens when we zoom in. I'm just going to come into 200. Can you guys see that? Can everybody see that? Right? See, it's kind of noisy. Let's see if I go even further. Can you see the noise? Right? So that is partly because of the underexposure. Okay. So when I have boosted the exposure in Lightroom, I'm trying to pull data out of a file that was really black. Like look at the histogram. Okay. I've pulled all that data out of the bottom part of the graph. There's less information on the left side of the graph over here than there is on the right side of the graph. Okay. So that's why you'll hear maybe exposed to the right, meaning give more exposure than less exposure, right? And as you can see, I can pull back those details in that light area, right, without losing detail in the dark. So if you had exposed this 1.5 to 2 stops brighter, you still could have pulled back that white and had it be better for noise here as well, okay? One other thing I'm seeing here, and you're going to want to go and check this lens that you used, which was, I can tell you, it was your 17 millimeter lens. So go and check your 17 millimeter lens, because you see this circle right here in the middle? Okay, if I zoom in a tiny little bit here, see, it looks like a blob, right? That's not a cloud. It's indeed a blob. Okay, so I think what's happening here is you have got a water spot on the front of your lens. So I'm just going to use the healing tool to fix it up and get rid of it. Okay, so that is a blob that you want to get rid of. Rob says he loves the smell of carbon fiber and rubber first thing in the morning. Fabulous. New tripod smell. It's like new car smell, right? Or new book smell. Does anybody else smell their books? Okay. So for those of you that are new and joining in, Rob is my other half, also known as the webmaster for Digital Photo Mentor and husband. And he says, yes, I notice everything. So I notice things that he doesn't see, even on television shows. For example, we've been watching Yellowstone. We watched Yellowstone, and Rob likes to use those little toothpick things. They're kind of they got a little piece of tooth dental floss and then a little pick, and one guy had one tucked into his hat, and I noticed it and Rob didn't see it. So yes, I definitely notice these things. All right, so far I've just done the tone control, right, and stuff here. I might go in and do some denoise, and this would be a good one maybe to use Topaz denoise, because it's got a lot of noise, and Lightroom doesn't do the greatest job on it. right? So if I zoom in here back to 100% and I try and get rid of this noise, okay, it does a good job if I crank it way up, but then the image gets sort of fuzzy, okay? Because how Lightroom does its noise reduction is it sort of blurs everything. Especially if you've got an image with stars and stuff, you'll actually end up see the stars disappear, okay? Because it's blurring everything. Okay, then I'm going to add some sharpening. This actually did a pretty good job on this one. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm increasing the sharpening quite high, and then I increase the masking slider. Okay, so let me show you what the masking slider does. So I'm going to take the sharpening quite high just so that you can see here. Right. So when I bring up the sharpening slider, see what's happening? It's sharpening the noise again. Okay. So you see the noise showing up in the building. So it's sharpening the edges, but it's also sharpening the sky and the noise. Okay. So when I bring this masking slider up, look at how it's disappearing. See the noise disappearing, because what happens with this masking, if you hold the Alt or Option key down when you're sliding it, anything that you see that's white has sharpening applied. So as I drag this masking slider up, you can see that it's now only applying to the edges and the outlines of things. Okay. So it's not applying at all in the sky. So I can get full maximum use of the noise reduction in the sky, right? Now that I'm looking at this, that building looks like it's leaning a little bit this way. So I might fix that. I can get full noise reduction in the sky, but still get the buildings a little bit sharper. Right? And one thing you have to watch out for is if you increase the sharpening too high, you start to get artifacts and things. Now you can really see it. Okay. So the masking back up here, see what that masking does? Always do some degree of the masking. Okay. So I'm going to go back in here and do a couple of other things. I want to make sure I've got lens corrections turned on. Okay, so this is something I talked about when you're doing your importing. If you're using Lightroom, you can create what's called an import preset or a develop import preset. And I've created several. If you want to share our Lightroom preset page, please, Rob. So I've created some that you can actually, oops, wrong ones, that you can actually apply when you import the images into Lightroom. So for example, applying the lens correction, okay, look at what happens when I just hover over that. Okay, so it shows the lens correction. I can add clarity, I can add a vignette, and add contrast and sharpening. Okay, so I'm going to choose this one that has lens corrections, clarity, vignette, and sharpening. So it has everything. And you can see that when I did that, it found the lens that Anne was using. Okay, and it applied not only vignette correction for anything that has lens. Some lenses have darker corners. It also applied a distortion correction. Okay, if I turn that off, you see what it's doing. Okay, and it did that automatically. So if you apply these when you import, you don't have to come back and do that later. Okay, it also checks off the chromatic aberration box. And I think that there was a little bit of chromatic aberration, tiny little bit, not much. That would look like usually a purple fringe on the outside of the image. Okay. See how that's actually done a nice job of straightening the image out. Okay. I'm also going to check to see that it's straight. So you can straighten an image a couple of different ways. I can do it with the crop tool, which is this guy here, and just clicking auto. Okay, so see how it did correct it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try a different way down under transform. Okay, there's a level. So if I click level, see, it did the same adjustment. See that? Or I could try auto. Okay, so auto is not only going to correct any tilt, but it will correct sort of building distortion in terms of perspective. Okay, so let me undo that. So see how the tops of these buildings look like they're falling away from the camera. Okay, so if I click auto, now it's the horizon is straight and the buildings are straight up and down. Okay, so that gives a nice representation of the skyline. Okay. I think the only other thing I'm going to do to this image is to add another mask, and I'm going to use a linear gradient just to darken this bottom part here. And I might even go like that. Okay, so I want to get that white thing a little bit. So I'm going to bring the highlights down here. just to take away from the sidewalk. Okay, I want to see more of the city taking attention than this sidewalk here and this sculpture thing. Okay, so I just did that on the bottom. Okay, nice image, and very nice, right? That's ready to be printed now. If you want to change this to black and white, you could do that as well. And we can just hit black and white, and that would make a nice black and white image. And remember that when you do it that way, as opposed to desaturation, you have the ability to adjust things because it knows that there's blue in the sky, for example. So I can lighten the sky. I can brighten the buildings or the water with the yellow slider, right? Same thing with the oranges. So I can really make a more targeted black and white, okay? Like so. But I think that that is a great image to go black and white. But it looks great either way, to be honest. There we go. Anne likes the black and white, or Lynn likes the black and white. Were you guys together when you were shooting it? They're travel buddies, these two. How many tours have you been on with us? Has it been 4 or 5? And if we had Ann Nickerson, she's been to about 6 or so, I think. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that description of sharpening. The masking slider is so important when you're doing sliding. And I saw somebody else asked about Luminar. Did I miss a question, Rob? Yeah, Kelly, it's great to have you back. Yes, I knew somebody had asked a question about Luminar. So Luminar is not better or worse. It's just different. Okay. Not everybody uses Lightroom. And I do have a couple images that I'm going to pull into Luminar today specifically. But I often do finishing touches. Okay. So for example, if I wanted to do some style enhancements on this one, I'll take it into Luminar. So I right click and I'm using Luminar as a plugin when I'm doing it this way. Right. And if you're using Luminar as a standalone, you would just open the image. Okay, so you're not using it as a plugin. So I use Luminar. I use Lightroom to do sort of my basic edits, and then I take it to Luminar to do more of my enhancements, shall we say, right? All right. While my Luminar is opening, let me just grab this page. So if you haven't already registered for this, this is the webinar page that Rob shared earlier. And the $9 early bird special is ending the end of today. Okay. So we've got over 100 people registered for that one. So it should be good. And that's on Monday. All right. Luminar is opened. So here's the image. So Luminar works in a template, Luminar AI. Okay, this is Luminar AI because there's different versions of Luminar. Luminar AI is template driven. So if you enjoy just clicking on some images and seeing what the result is, and you don't want to spend a lot of time editing, okay, they have templates where you can literally just one click and off you go. Okay, so these ones here were suggested by Luminar AI, big city light. So it knows that this is a city image. Okay, so it's picking up. Ooh, that one's kind of cool. Right, it's picking up the city lights. That one's giving me a little bit too much crunch in the sky. So I might try a few templates and see what they work like, if I like what they're doing. And then you can just edit from there. Okay, so that's really pulling out the reflection in the sky, in the water detail, cozy nights. That's very dramatic. So see, it's got more of a central point there. I'm actually going to go with this one because I have a feeling I know what it's doing. It's added a vignette. And if I go in here, see, it's added a strong vignette at -73. And if I go to feather 0, you can see where the vignette is. Okay, so that's another little trick that I use. I can also move it around. So let's say I want more of the city and I don't want this part in there. Maybe make it just a little bigger to cover all the boat and that skyscraper. And then turn the feather back up. Okay? So notice it's also adding an inner light, so it's brightening that center spot a little bit more. And I'm going to go not quite so dark on that one. But overall, I think that's this vignette is doing a really nice job. Okay? So it really pulls your eye into the skyline. Right? You can see what else this template is applied. It's applied some enhance. Okay. One of the other things I love in the Luminar is the sky enhancer. So it acts like a polarizing filter to darken the sky, which in this case, I don't necessarily want because we want to keep it lighter. Accent AI does a great job sort of brightening up shadows. It's kind of like if you increase the shadows and decrease the highlights, it's like this is combining those two sliders, right? You can see it's added some structure. And what I might do here, because structure kind of is like clarity and it's giving a nice effect on the image, I also will take things to the nth degree, such as bring the amounts up really, really high, because I want to see what it's doing. And I think in this case, I want to just sort of remove the sky. So I'm going to erase this effect from the sky because I don't want the sky to be extra crunchy, shall we say, right? So I'm doing a really sort of quick and dirty job here just to show you, right? And it gives me the mask so I can see where it's red, the filter is applying, and I'm removing that mask from the sky, okay? Again, it's not a perfect job, but you get the idea. So now this little tool is applying to the city. You see how it sparked up the city? I'll turn it off again. And also the reflection. Look what it's doing to the reflection, okay? And then I'll just turn it down a bit. So I'll take the sliders to the max, okay? So I'll take them, all the way. Take them to the max, do any of my masking, because then it's more obvious. I can see it, and then turn it back down, okay? Now I'm going to copy this mask, okay? And then I'm going to make sure that whatever's happening in details, I'm going to apply the same mask, okay? Because I don't want the sky enhanced in any way. Now it's smoother and softer, okay? So the details are applying mostly to the city and what's happening in here, okay? Sounds like everybody's talking about going to visit Anne in Vancouver. So you might have some guests, Anne. Okay, this one's also applied the Orton effect. I'm going to turn this one off and try mystical instead because I tend to like mystical better on landscapes. It gives more of the color to come through. So if I see that, I can bring the shadows up a little bit more. And I'm going to dial the saturation down just a little bit. So I like the mystical one on this image as opposed to glow or the Orton. What I might try is glow, actually. So what glow does is it makes the highlights softer. See that? So it makes the actual light sources have a glow around them. Okay. Let's do a before and after in Luminar. I'm just going to get myself off the screen here so you can see the whole image. Oops. I got to be in Luminar to show the before and after. So that's the before. That's what we had in Lightroom, which looked pretty good in Lightroom, I thought. And that's what we got now. Okay, so it was a quick selection of a template and a couple of tweaks of things. And now we've got a really, really gorgeous image. Okay. I expect to see you reproducing this, Anne, and making a nice big print to put on your wall at home. Let's see. Okay, any other questions? Have I missed anything? Let's go back to Lightroom. And there's the new image. So this is finished, right? So I want to ask everybody two questions. So let me go back here and look at the two versions side by side. Okay, so the left one is the Lightroom version and the right one is the Luminar version. Tell me in the comment area, which one do you prefer? Lightroom, so left is Lightroom, or the right one, Luminar, and why? And also tell me, did you pick anything up along this tutorial in terms of what you can then go apply on your images? Somebody already mentioned the sharpening sliders, things like that. What did you pick up from this tutorial? Kelly says, I do that about on all of my images, lens corrections. My images almost has a bubble or curve appearance. Yes, if you have a really wide lens like a fisheye, it can do some correction to it. I tend to actually not correct my fisheye because I'm usually using that lens on purpose. But if you have a really wide lens and you want less of that distortion, absolutely lens corrections will help you with that. Kelly says, great image, Anne. I tend to agree. Yes, Anne has been to Cuba, Morocco, India. Plus, you also came to BC and Drumheller as well. We did those workshops, and we drank some lovely wine together in BC. I think you're right, Lynn. I think 5 workshops and tours. Another one from Nancy. Great photo. Hey, Stephanie. I've got one of your images as well today. All right. So let's see. Lynn prefers the right image. Nancy likes the right image. Luminar. Okay, so that seems to be the winning one. And learned about better color, focus, and tones. Excellent. Rob likes the Luminar one. Michael likes the Luminar one. Stephanie, yeah, seems to be consensus. Stronger vignette on the Lightroom one. Well, I could certainly try that. The only disadvantage of Lightroom vignettes is I can't move it around, but I'd have to do a radial filter. Yeah. Another one for Luminar. Okay, seems unanimous. Eyes drawn more to the building. And that has to do with punching up those colors in the buildings and also darkening the edges. Okay, so the vignettes really serve a great purpose there. Okay. Oh yeah. So if Marilyn is watching, you may have met Marilyn Ann. If you remember, we were doing their photos. So I think we were having wine or something beforehand. Okay. Kelly wants to know how much difference between Lightroom and Luminar just for the black and white. Do you mean conversion into black and white? I could do the same conversion in Luminar into black and white, and it would be virtually, I can make them look virtually the same. The process is similar, right? Okay. And no, that would have been in Okanagan that you would have met Marilyn because they live in BC as well. So do you want me to do a black and white on this one? So because I didn't bring this to Photoshop, this is now a finished JPEG image. Okay, you can can't see the file format. But if I wanted to make this one in black and white, I could go again. And somebody said a darker vignette on this one. So I'm going to do a darker vignette. And these guys are getting in the road here. So I'm just going to put more here. So I'm going to make about the same sort of size that Luminar did. And the cool thing about this one is I can now actually rotate it. So I'm using a radial filter as opposed to the post-crop vignette because then it allows me to move it around. Yeah, see how these guys get in the road here. I'm just going to move that. So these new masking tools, the thing that pops up, you can actually just grab it and move it around if you don't like where it is. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to darken. See what I did? I'm going to invert it though because I did the inside. So we want the outside. That's better. So see where it's applying? Outside. Okay. Maybe I'll do a little bit more of a fade. Like that. Okay, so I've darkened a little bit more. Now if I want to do the inside lighter, okay, I would have to duplicate it again and invert it back. and then brighten the inside. So that's kind of replicating what the Luminar one did. But I was able to do that in Luminar just with the vignette tool, whereas in Lightroom I had to do 2 different mask tools to get the same thing. Okay. Now let's look at them side by side and see if they're closer. Closer, right? The colors are a bit more punchier in the Luminar one. You can see that, but they're pretty close now. Okay, so it's punched up the orange. And remember that we dialed down the orange in here. So if I want more orange, I can just bring it back. Now we're closer. Right? I find though that the demystify or like the softening filters in Luminar, there isn't an equal in Lightroom. Because I don't want to do minus clarity. It kind of just tends to get mushy. So if you want that kind of a softening effect, I would definitely take it into Luminar. Right? So Marguerite likes the Luminar version as well. Right? Seems to be absolutely unanimous. All right. Yes, the vignette was definitely easier in Luminar. All right, let's do another image because we're spending all our time on one. So I've got one of Stephanie's that I started as well, and then Rita's here, so I've got one of hers too. Right? And I'm not going to go too much over an hour today because I've got to get ready for the webinar on Monday. So this was the original image, and I've already done some edits to this one. So I'm going to reset and show you what I've done. So the immediate challenge and what I notice here is that the bird is very similar tone as the background. Okay, so getting him to stand out, I originally chose a different camera profile. Okay, so I chose landscape. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a copy of this one, and I'll do one in Luminar and one in Lightroom. Okay, see how different they are. This is where the new masking tools in Luminar and Lightroom, sorry, really came in handy. Okay, so I'm actually going to, I'm not going to increase the whites because I don't want to push the exposure up. I'm going to darken it overall a little bit. You know, the bird is a little bit dark, but I'm looking actually at the background here. So I'm trying to minimize a lot of these things here, and I'm not going to do, see what happens when I do highlights. It does a good thing on the background, but not on the bird. It makes him look too flat. So I'm not going to pull the highlights down. It completely gets rid of the lighting on him. I'm going to leave that because everything here is a global edit. It applies to the whole image, right? I might do a little bit of a crop on this one, partly because there's these bright spots up here, and I could go in and tone them down or crop or clone them out, but I'm just going to crop them out, okay, because that's the easiest. So I'm trying to not have a bright area at the very top, and you can see that I got rid of most of them, right? But I can then go in and just use the Lightroom clone tool to try and clone them out. Let's see, that does an okay job. So I'm trying to not have bright spots right above his head that take my attention away from him, right? I want him to be the focal point. So I'm going to, I don't want to do texture and clarity overall again because it's going to increase that contrast in the background, right? So if you've forgotten, if you've watched this show before, my show, the 4 things that grab your attention in the background, right, are brightness, sharpness, color, and contrast. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up there while I work on this because when I increase the clarity and the texture, it increases the bird and makes him look good, but it brings too much attention to the background, right? If you remember our upside down trick, if we look at the image upside down, okay, where does your eye go? Let's just do the full bird here. Where does your eye go? Kind of goes all over the place, but mostly to this part over here because it's so contrasty, right? So when I'm doing this image, what I'm trying to establish is the bird standing out more from the background. Okay, so that's my goal here. Now I'm going to use the masking tools, and I'm going to select subject and cross my fingers and hope it finds the bird, right? So you can see that it did a really good job. You could change the masking overlay color. Okay, so the bird has lots of green in them. I just want to change that to red. So you can see that the program did a good job of selecting the bird, right? Let's see. Yep, perfect. So now this is where I'm going to add clarity. See, look at that. Just by adding clarity, it gives him, makes him stand out. Texture is going to pick up the texture in his nice little feathers. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see what it's doing for him, right? And I'm going to add a little bit of black. So notice when I add black, look what happens to his color. Okay, so notice I haven't adjusted saturation, but by adding the black, I am increasing the color saturation. Okay, because when you have an image that's overexposed or bright, the colors come out pale, right? So if I add black in here, his colors are going to come out naturally. Right? Look at the difference. Before, after, just on the bird. Right? Now, because this one works so great to select the bird, I'm going to do another one and select him again. But once he's selected, I'm going to invert it. And there's a little button over here because now I've got the background selected really nicely. Right? This is where I'm going to bring the highlights that I didn't do before all the way down. Okay? And that deals with a lot of that contrast problem in the background. Okay? So I can bring the highlights down. I can bring the shadows up, which is going to flatten the overall background and then darken the whole thing. Okay, now look at what a difference that made. Okay, so if I turn off all the two masks, look what difference it makes to him. Okay, he just pops right out of that picture. Right. And the beautiful thing is you've got full control that you can go back and edit it at any time. Right? I can also lower the sharpness, lower the clarity, lower the texture. Okay, and now the background starts to become out of focus as well. Let's just take it to the nth degree so you see what I'm seeing. Okay, probably wouldn't go that far. Clarity minus starts to look mushy. Okay? I do like the negative sharpness, but you can also increase denoise, and that actually makes it blurrier as well. Okay, so if I turn that background mask off, look at the difference. Okay. Then I'm going to add one of my preset vignettes. Let's do that one. So now look at what we've got. Now I'm going to check my highlights overall. Maybe a little less black and a little bit less darkness. Okay. So before, after. Any thoughts on that? How does that look? Very funny, Rob. Actually, Stephanie gave me the bird, if we're being technical. Kelly wants to know, the webinar, will it repeat or access the video after the fact? Yes. Because it's a paid one, you will have access to watch the recording afterwards, and it will not expire. Okay, so the ones that we do that are generally a free one, they're only available for a limited time in the system that we have to do those types of webinars. This one is going to be saved. We're going to keep it, and you'll just have to log in on our website to access it, but you have to purchase it. And if you do so today, Kelly, you'll just pay the $9. And even if you can't come live on Monday, you'll get access to that one later. If you buy it tomorrow or after the recording's available, it will be $19. So you save $10. Hi, Catherine. Okay. With your iOS updates, I no longer have access to Lightroom until I purchase it again. Aha. I'm guessing what happened, Michael, is you have an older version of Lightroom, like you had probably Lightroom 6. And if you updated your computer to a newer operating system, it doesn't run on it anymore. Is that correct? And in which case, that's exactly what will happen. So you either need to get the Luminar or get the Lightroom subscription model. So you can't buy Lightroom anymore outright. You have to do the subscription model and pay, I think it's $10 a month indefinitely. Like you can't stop paying. Or you could look at something like Luminar or another software. I'm actually going to be doing a review of AC/DC photo raw coming up soon as well. And to be honest, I did a quick test of it the other day, and it's okay, it's good, but it doesn't have some of the things and features that Luminar has. But what it does have is more of an organizational. You can edit the metadata, do flags and tags, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. The bird really pops. Okay, so same question on this one. What did everybody learn here? Okay, so did you learn maybe how to approach an image, what to do to it when you're starting? I'd love to hear from Stephanie because it's her image, in terms of what did you do with this image when you processed it, okay? Or did I do something or look at it in a different way than you did, right? Actually, this one is a really good example. I'm going to just turn this one into black and white, because if you just do minus saturation on this one, look what happens to the bird. His blue feathers and his green feathers look the same tone, okay? But if you go black and white, it gives you the ability to adjust the tones, okay? So I can make his head darker and his feathers lighter. See that? I can adjust the foliage darker or lighter as well. Okay. So you have much better control with the black and white when you are using the black and white panel. Okay. I said I was going to do this one in Luminar as well, so let's give that a go. Okay, so this is back to the original here, and I haven't done anything to it. So I'm going to open this one in Luminar, and this time I'm actually going to open it like a raw file. Okay, so if you want to do your basic edits in Luminar as well, from Lightroom, instead of choosing edit in, choose export and then open source files under the Luminar AI. Okay, so opening source file means it's going to open the raw file. Okay. You use the link, Michael. If you could post it again, Rob just posted it for you in the chat there. Just click on that link and you can sign up right there on that page. If you're watching this video later, the link to the webinar will be in the video description. You weren't as successful as bringing the bird out from the background. So now this is your homework, Stephanie. Go and try and reproduce the same thing, right? Kelly learned about masking. Do you have the newest version of Lightroom, Kelly? The new tools are really powerful, and we actually did a full 6-hour, 2-day class with Pete Vandenine just on those tools. Okay, so what I'm showing you today is just sort of the tip of the iceberg. If you could share a link to that webinar, the recording of that one is available if you didn't attend that one, Kelly, as well, and you want to learn more about masking tools. The local adjustment on the bird using black to bring out the colors was a great reminder. Awesome. Yes. Updated to Luminar AI. Perfect. Awesome. I'm curious, Michael, if you're going to be going to Neo or are you going to stick with Luminar AI? I'm going to be doing a class on Neo as soon as it's available. I have like a early beta version now, but I'll be doing a full class once Neo is available. Okay, so now we got our bird in Luminar, and I'm just going to start with a template. Now notice again, the program really has a lot of AI. So notice it's chosen a collection called Animal Friends. Okay, so right out of the gate, it knows that I have a bird or an animal, right? And this first one does a really nice job on the bird. So what I'm looking at is the bird. Okay, so before and after, because I know that whatever is applying in the background, I can just mask it, remember? So far, I like that one. Let's see. Not much difference. Oh, that's kind of neat. Lots more blue there. That's kind of neat, actually. So we could go a totally different way with this one. Let's see what else. Nature. Okay, so all of the ones they're choosing, right? They know that we're dealing with something in nature. Okay, that one's got lots of color. right? So I think I either like this one or one of the other ones. You can also dial down the effect, right? So notice here the slider at the bottom, I can literally just lessen the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to get the bird looking how I want him. And then I'm just going to go into the tools and have a look at what's been applied and mask it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on the bird. Okay, so I'm going to paint the mask into him. So remember, wherever it's red, this tool or this filter is applying. Okay, and the reason I chose to paint in is because there's less painting to do and I'm lazy. So I'm painting in the bird instead of out everything else. Okay, so just get his foot. Okay, now I'm going to, so now you can see that it only applies this filter. It's only applying to the bird. Okay, but I've copied that mask again because I'm guessing structure, yeah, was applied. So watch the background when I paste this mask in, okay, because it's going to remove that structure from the background. Okay, now I could also go the opposite way with this one. Okay, so you'll notice that it's applying plus structure on the bird, but I could actually go the other way and do minus structure and invert the mask. Right, you can see now it's applying to the background, and it did the same kind of thing that I did in Lightroom when I did the subject masking. Right, so the neat thing about the tools in Luminar is I did have to paint him. It didn't select him automatically, but once I did it once, I could just copy and use it again. Okay. Right, same thing with details. I don't want to sharpen the background, so remember I'm going to paste that in again. So I can see it's only applying on him. And I'm just hitting the / key to see the mask and where it's applying. Okay. Like so. Let's see what else we got. Okay, there's not a vignette on here, so we can definitely add a vignette. Okay, so I go really dark, feather 0. Okay, so you'll be able to see. There we go. I'm going to make it smaller, and I'm going to make it more circular so it goes right around the bird. Okay. Then I'm going to pick him as the subject area, like so. So I'm doing all that to place it and then put the feather back up to something high and the amount to an area that's not kind of overboard. Okay. I'm going to check under light here. Okay, so there's been smart contrast applied, which also applies to the background. So I'm actually going to dial that down here. Okay, and I'm just going to check. So it has done a nice job actually applying a curve, which darkened the image, and whites and blacks, which gives it more contrast. Right? I'm going to warm the image up a little bit. I'm going to give them a little bit more yellow, right? Like so. And let's see what else I might add. Okay. If I go into color and I want to affect the background like I did before, if I try darkening greens, the problem is it's going to affect the bird as well. Okay, but let's just see what I can do here in terms of affecting the color in the background. Oops, this is hue. I want to get on luminance, not hue. Okay, so darken, 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 darken. Okay, so see how that's really affecting the background? Okay, so I've done a nice job with the background, but it affected the bird. So I'm just going to paste that mask in again. So it's only going to apply on the bird now, remember? And then invert it. So it only applies there. Okay, so now you can see that I've effectively used the color panel to further darken the background. Okay. So very similar. And then I might use that demystify or mystical, demystify. Use that mystical one, okay, like so. And I want to see if it recognizes. Portrait Bokeh does a great job of blurring and darkening the background, but it doesn't recognize birds, unfortunately. So now I can do soft focus, or I can do Orton effect. And again, it's applying everywhere. But if I don't want it on the bird, again, use the same paste and invert. So let's take a look at the before and after. I'm going to go into the local masking tools. So these are kind of like an extra adjustment layer, like if you're using Photoshop. And you'll notice that in here, I can adjust the exposure, the highlights, because I really want to get these highlights here, and it's not picking up. So I'm going to try attacking it this way, and then I can do that same mask again and invert it. Okay, so you can see what I'm just affecting the background. So it gives me another way to darken the background a little bit more. I'm not quite getting what I want. I want to get those highlights down a bit. Maybe if I do contrast. There we go. That might work better. That's what I did in Lightroom. I lowered the contrast. And something is making it too blurry, so I'm just going to get rid of some of these blurs. How's that? Great. Another one that I can use to adjust tones is the super contrast. I'm just going to turn this one off. Okay, so let's say I still want to affect these highlights in the background. So super contrast allows you to adjust highlights, midtones, and shadows. Okay, and so I'm just going to bring it up to the middle, and then you can see if I go to the right, where balance, it darkens. Okay. I'm looking at the background highlights, and I'm trying to look at the same thing here. And again, it's applying to the bird. Oh, his head looks pretty good, actually. So I'm going to paste that same mask in, invert it. I kind of liked what it was doing on the birds on his head, so I might just paint it in a little bit more on his head. It gave him some really nice colors there. See that? Look at that. So before and after. Similar effect as what we got from Lightroom, just a different way of approaching it, right? Any questions? Let me scroll back here. So we didn't get to a lot of images today. I'm going to have to cut it off because I've got an appointment in an hour to help one of my students. Let's see. Vicky has a question. Would you ever consider, with a bright subject, brightening the background instead of darkening it so the bird pops out? Yeah, I would. I didn't do that in this case because I didn't think I could get rid of, where are we here? I don't know how many versions of this bird. I didn't do that in this case because I didn't think that I would be able to make the background bright enough, but I have done so in cases where there's more bright than there's dark. Yes. So definitely you can make the bird stand out either way. That's a good question, Vicky. Never considered the noise reduction slider to add a bit of blur to the background? Yes, you can use minus sharpness, minus clarity, minus texture, and increase noise reduction. All of those things add a blur. Rob is reminding you, if you haven't already given this video a thumbs up, if you're joining us live today or if you're watching later, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. You can also set yourself a reminder on the live page. Right after I finish this one, the next one for next week will be set up. And you can set yourself a reminder so that YouTube will remind you of when the next one comes out live. Right? How can I refresh yourself with Luminar AI since you've not used it in a year? Rob's given you a link to a playlist. I would also, if you could please give him a link to our 5-day editing challenge, that would be the best way to do that, because then you'll get access to my raw files and a new video every day. You don't have to do them in 5 days. If you own Luminar AI, you can take longer. Just keep the emails. You'll get to download my images and you can practice the tutorial with the same image as in the demonstration. Luminar does do a great job finishing. Yes, it's like the special effects, right? But it's better than just special effects. It's not like it's just like Instagram filters, right? It's a lot more flexible than that. Same thing for you, Stephanie. I would also suggest the 5-day editing challenge if you haven't already done that before. Rob is putting a link to that coming up in the chat or in the description area below if you're watching this later. Previously, lots of these exact recorded videos, these learn to edit live ones, there's lots of techniques on there for both Lightroom and Luminar, as well as some Photoshop. Right? As Rob said, just check the description and the table of contents. Okay? And usually what Rob does after the fact is when I'm finished, he'll go through and put links to different sections. So if you want to learn to do a specific thing, you can just click on that and jump to that section and then the video. Okay? Nice photo, Anne says to Stephanie. Beautiful bird. Yeah, great photo. Nice and sharp. Stephanie has pre-purchased Neo. Awesome. And there's the 5-day sign up. So just grab that link. It's bit.ly 5dc/start. And that will get you to the 5-day challenge. And on that note, as Anne said, see you Monday. Now, I only managed to edit 2 images today. I do have one of Nancy's, so I don't want to continue too much today because I have to get going and work on our webinar, but I'm going to save Rita's for next week. Rita sent me another interesting image, and I'm going to save yours, Nancy, as well. So I've got some nice images to work on next week. And if Jean-Philippe joins us, I've got a couple of his images that I can work on as well. So I am going to stop there. And as Anne said, I'll see you on Monday. I would love to hear from you in the chat if you're still watching. What did you pick up today? Tell me, or in the comment area, please tell me one thing you learned from this video. If you learned more than one, put a list. We'd love to hear what you're getting from these. I want to make sure that they're providing value each week and you learn something. And also by doing these every week, it keeps me fresh, and I always learn new things too, because I love actually going and learning some new techniques and then teaching them to you. Okay, so sometimes I'll go and learn something just to teach you guys that thing, right? So by coming back every week, it makes you get back to it and practice, right? Because practice is the thing that is going to take your images, whether that be photography or editing, to the next level, right? So remember, you can submit your images using that link right there, and hopefully I'll have lots of interesting images. Well, I already do. You guys are sending fantastic images. Keep them coming. I love it. Lots of variety of subject matter, and hopefully I will see many of you on Monday. We're going to be doing that one on Zoom, so if you want to ask questions live, you'll be able to come on the microphone and or video if you want to show your face, so we'll actually be able to see each other this time, which is be cool. So I'll see you all on Monday, and take care until next week.